How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with Lesley Smith. She is a professional triathlete from the Boulder, Colorado area, and she is on the RTS team. So if you remember our previous podcast with Mark Dubrick or Nicholas Chase or Nicole Farcaro or Garrett Smith or any of those guys, they are on that team as well. So don't want to give away too much, but this is a really awesome conversation about mental prep and just thinking about the future and thinking about who we are as individuals, how it's more three-dimensional than two-dimensional. That's the conversation. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Lesley Smith. I guess most people won't know this, but we're recording again because we had a little technical issue, but really happy to have you on the podcast officially for the second time,
Yes.
but
Yes.
yeah, unofficially at the same time. So thanks for making the time and being on here. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Well, thanks for having me back after, trying to plan for a while.
Yeah, for sure. So what's been new in your world? What's going on as of late?
Well, what's going on as of late for me? So I just kind of took a couple of weeks kind of easy. I kind of needed a reset for the triathlon season. And when I say a reset, just kind of, I did Ironman Texas, Boulder 70.3, and Mont Tremblant 70.3. And, I would say Texas went fine. Boulder went fine. Mont Tremblant did not go well at all. I did not handle that on many levels very well. And honestly, I just kind of got to a place over the past month where I was feeling pretty, I don't know, kind of stressed out and negative about triathlon. And I think that that happens as much as I'm really grateful for the experience. I know it's a privilege and I'm not doing it forever. And I'm trying to be very positive. I just kind of got to feeling a bit negative about it over the past month. So, and I think part of that stems from kind of being halfway in the door of wanting to focus on the Ironman Pro Series and having not done full Ironman really since like 2019. And I told myself I was going to see how it goes, but, I kind of came to the conclusion that 3 full Ironmans is not in the cards for me this year, which is what you need to do to maximize your points and attempt to be in the top 10. So I think just kind of coming to that realization, a lot more details involved with all this, but I think that I just kind of needed to say, okay, well, maybe that's not the focus anymore. Reset. Took a couple weeks pretty easy. Just to rest up and just to be fresh, to really get going again and really get some focus back. So that's been a big part of my life.
Yeah, for sure. So what is your focus right now? Like you're taking a step back and you're getting back to that place of recovery. Have you figured out what your new outlook is going to be?
Yeah, I would like to do a full Ironman. I want another attempt at it. Again, like I said, I did handful like 2017 through 2019. So I would like to improve upon that and try to get the nutrition right. I mean, it's just the narrative around nutrition is just even changed over the past few years. And just what people are doing is next level. And at Texas, I really think I got in more carbs than I ever have in a race per hour. I felt better at the end of the bike than I did at the beginning, which I don't know how you managed to do that, but I did. I'm not saying that's a good thing. But, then on the run, oh man, I felt great. My legs felt great coming off the bike, but around like mile 8, which is not very far into 26.2, I started getting these waves of like feeling really sleepy and almost kind of like I was going to pass out. And that was happening off and on then the entire rest of the run. It was not a pleasant experience. And it was one of those races, super high humidity and pretty warm. And a lot of people struggled. Kind of one of those, like certain people handle the conditions better. But yeah, it was frustrating because again, it actually still ended up pretty decent. I got 10th and it was a competitive race as part of the Pro Series. And so it wasn't terrible, but I just really would like another stab at a full Ironman and just try to do it better than in the past and better than Texas. And so, right now I don't have a super exact plan at this point, but I would like to focus on something like Ironman Chattanooga, Ironman Barcelona, something around that time frame in the fall. That an Ironman that's not part of the Pro Series. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at right now with some 70.3s in there, potentially going to Talon. I'm not sure if I think I'm pronouncing that right, at the end of August, and or Michigan 70.3. And then kind of going, I'm not being very like continuous with my timeline here, but, and
You're
then,
totally fine.
full Ironman, and then potentially Indian Wells or make the trip to New Zealand, which is a very
Yeah.
big trip for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
70.3
And you've already
course.
qualified for that, correct?
Yes, I
For New
qualified
Zealand.
last year, so
Yeah, yeah.
definitely have a spot for that, and trying to make that happen. I think that would be a very cool trip and a very, a cool place to stay after and travel, hopefully,
Yeah.
if it happens. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now.
Good deal. Yeah, you should definitely do New Zealand. I'm going, and my family convinced them all to kind of take a big family trip. So we're going to go the 9th of December before the race, and then we're not going to come back home till the 1st of January. So
Oh,
maybe we'll have to meet
nice.
up somewhere and do a little traveling around.
Yeah, totally. And I'm open to ideas of what to do as well. And, I think a big thing, I have family who kind of wants to join too. And I'm kind of like, all right, guys, we gotta, the accommodations there are really tough. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, we kind of got to plan this if we're going to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
But it's crazy that I know this is cliche to say, but I mean, it's crazy to me. It's end of July already in 2024. So things are coming up.
No, yeah, it's been going by super fast. My wife just graduated from nurse practitioner school, and we moved out living with our in-laws for a few months before we head out to California. And yeah, this year is flying by, and
Yes.
it is
Crazy.
cliche, but especially with everything that's going on in the world right now, it's just like,
Uh-huh.
here's triathlon, and then here's the world, and the world seems really confused
I,
and crazy right now. And I'm just like,
I
what is going on?
agree. I agree. And so many people feel the same way, and part of me is like, are people just more aware of things now? Is there just like, are we just like getting to peak, like being overly inundated with information all the time, and just information so accessible with social media, and having to like piece through, is this valid information or not?
Yeah,
I think, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, and I think everyone, just with the way things are with media these days, it's like very overstimulating for most people.
yeah.
Overstimulating is the best word I can use to describe it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it actually reminds me of this frame of time. It reminds me of right in, I want to say it was mid March of 2020, right before things went like gangbusters crazy. And I was
Yeah.
following social media like super heavy. Twitter was like the place where I go, or now X. And
Yeah.
it reminds me of like a very similar time where there's just like new stuff coming out every 30 seconds. And it's just like,
Yeah.
when COVID got around, we ended up actually living here with my in-laws for like 4 months, and I kind of just unplugged from everything. And it's getting to that point now where it's like, I don't even know what to think, because it's almost like, I don't know, if we were living in 1930s in Poland, and there's all this stuff on the news like, oh yeah, there's going to be an invasion soon or whatever, and a lot of people didn't believe it, or there's a lot of flying
Yes.
information, and everyone's like, well, what's real, what's not? I don't want to say that it's the same, because it's definitely different, but I feel like this time period is going to be mentioned in the history books if this world is allowed to go on for much longer. Like, it just seems like nothing
I
makes sense.
agree. I
Yeah.
agree. And it's kind of hard because you want to feel informed just as a human living during this time, but it's also, you have to balance it out with your mental health and the ability that it feels like you kind of feel like you don't, like what do you do to help the bad things? I don't know. I think just putting
Yeah.
it very simply, I think a lot of people feel that way. And I think that, yeah, like you said, sometimes it can be good to just unplug from everything because it's like very overwhelming. And it just because you unplug for a while doesn't mean you are all of a sudden saying, I don't need or want to be informed. I think,
Yeah.
there's kind of a balance.
Yeah. Yeah. Mental health is huge. So again, I'm going to keep talking about this area because we're living up here, but it's up in the mountains of Tennessee, and we have, I don't know, maybe it's a 700 or 800 square foot garden. And I went out yesterday evening just to go pick green beans, the second round of green beans, and a bunch of tomatoes and stuff. And there's something about that kind of being in the dirt with my sandals on. It was after a fresh rain, and I'm picking the beans, and like I'm pulling these plants up and looking underneath, and there's these little bugs that are going to town eating their stuff, and there's just something about being connected outside and realizing like, well, this is really what matters. Like, can I grow some food and survive? Can I live? Because there's
Yeah,
so many other things going all the time. And I feel like if I lived in a more simpler time where it is much more survival instinct, live off the land of everything, there's some stresses to that, but I think that it's got to be healthier long term.
I agree. And I always look at things like what did humans do for, and I would never claim to be some sort of evolutionary expert or anything, but like just
Yeah.
kind of common sense, like what did humans do for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, you know, leading up to what is just the sliver of time of like modern, the way humans are living in modern times. And I think
Yeah.
that one thing that makes sense to me is, yeah, having connection with the earth, like you said. And I'm not saying I practice what I preach that much, but, you know, I've seen a documentary, read stuff on grounding, and
Hmm.
that grounding just being like humans, you know, we wear shoes that are, you know, that disconnect us from the earth. Like I'm just like at your actual skin touching the earth,
Hmm.
is something that, and again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this, but the documentary I watched, they say it like reduces inflammation and people's health problems. And because we're just completely disconnected, and you know, you can
Right.
stay inside all day, wear shoes outside, maybe the little bit you're outside, and never have any contact with the earth. So I think that what you just said about gardening, to me, that makes complete sense. There's probably some part of that that is, you know, just having that actual connection, and doing something simple that is almost kind of, I don't know, it like calms the brain or calms the
Yeah.
nervous system, maybe. I don't
Hmm.
know.
No, yeah, 100%. Have you ever walked barefoot in like the cool morning and in some grass?
I have in my life, and that's something that sounds amazing. And I just, like I said, I don't really practice what I preach, and I think it's because you get rushed and you're like, but it's like one of those things that I'm like, oh, I should do that, I should do that, and yeah. But I think that's amazing to.
Yeah. Where are you living right now?
So I live in Boulder,
Okay.
Colorado, and I am actually, that's another thing going on in life is I've been in the kind of north-ish central area of Boulder, you know, basically the entire 10 years I've lived here. And I'm actually moving in a couple weeks to South
Oh, wow.
Boulder. So, I mean, it's not a very big place. So it's not,
Yeah.
we're talking like 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of nice. It'll be 15 minutes closer to Denver, which can be fun to get out of the bubble here and go
Yeah.
there and do things with friends. And so I'm looking forward to it, but it's going to be a really big change and big stressor, but that's always the case with moving. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we've been kind of talking a bit about mental stress and the different things to do to maybe like alleviate that stress. So I'm curious for you, if someone was to ask, "Hey, Leslie, I want to, prepare for a half Ironman, first time ever," like
mhm.
exactly what to tell them. If someone came to you in a similar fashion and said, "Hey, like I want to have mental stamina and I want to be able to get through life and have like a strong mental capacity to deal with stress, to absorb the good and the bad," what would you say to them? How would you help them?
Oh, I would kind of say what we just talked about. I think I saw some quote that, you know, it's like, you know, millions of quotes you see, but things that stick with you, that was like the true sign of success is a calm nervous system, or something. I don't know if I'm saying it exactly right, but I think that to like, it's so easy, like I just said, to just get overstimulated. And when I say overstimulated, like just being overthinking things, being hit with information all the time, being hit with opinions all the time, being hit with, you should be living like this, or you should be doing this. And it's just, there's just too much stimulation out there these days. And so I think a great way to deal with stress is to just keep things simple and peaceful, and be intentional about doing that. And maybe turning off the phone for a portion of the day, going walking in the grass, like you said, or gardening, or doing something that, even if you have like a super big to-do list, just taking some time away from that feeling of, I got to check this off, I got to do this, I'm running out of time, that kind of loop you get in. I think if you can break that and then kind of reset yourself, and really get clear on what your priorities are and where you know, where you're getting your energy, and then going from there. And maybe that's kind of vague, but I found for me, when I can actually do that, again, I'm not saying I'm great at doing that, but
Yeah, I was going to say, when are you doing this?
I think that just for me, being okay, like for example, being okay, being like, oh, I was kind of a piece of junk today. I didn't really do much. And I think having some of those days is okay. And like I said, kind of getting out of that loop of, oh, the next thing, oh, the next thing. And I think also a big thing that I've learned, let's say over the past 5, especially years of my life, let's say, that I didn't really think about before is that you don't have unlimited energy to give to people and to things and activities. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can only do so much. And I think that the way we live right now, it's just so, immediate responses are expected and being caught up on your phone all the time is expected. And it's just like sometimes just the pace of that, slowing that pace down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I keep going back to the same thing of trying to live a bit more simply and calm your nervous system down and
Yeah.
not have all this coming at your brain all the time. I really think that's the key to just, yeah, managing stress and enjoying life more.
Yeah, I like how you talked about pace because I think it's analogous to everything that we do in triathlon. Because if your coach was to assign you a VO2 max session every single day, or really really long efforts, like it would just be an impossible thing. But I think that the popular culture, especially within like the business realm, is not everyone, and there's some more popular voices coming against this, but by and large, I think the culture is, oh, I got to work 40, 50 hours a week. That's what success
Right.
is, rah, rah, rah. But really, like because of triathlon, I've actually backed off my days of intensity. Like some days I do have very much a blitz, like 8 hours straight working on something nonstop. And then you're into the day like, oh man, I'm exhausted. But then
Right.
the next couple of days, if I need to take it easier, like take it easier. And I found that that's like pretty good way to live. And even like people who I not employ directly, but manage, telling them like, yeah, like, hey, today, like give all that you
Yeah.
can. But if tomorrow you need more of a rest, like take that rest. And by and large, I think we're all more efficient and get more done productivity wise if we are enabling ourselves to be able to step back and, like you're saying, take a break.
I agree. And that what you just said is what I was trying to articulate too. I think you end up being more productive if you can do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just kind of knowing yourself and, yep, and what you need. So yeah, that's a big thing for me to try to just kind of step away from the grind. And honestly, how you said it, weaving triathlon into this. I also think one thing that has changed, and by the way, this is not always for the better for me. It's kind of a trade-off, is I think when I was like, when I really got into triathlon seriously around 2014, 2015, and then those next few years, I really had this attitude, almost like I really had this attitude of what a coach gives me, I need to do it. And it's a grind day in and day out. And to miss a workout or to do a workout and not be able to do it or have it go poorly would really affect me mentally and make me feel like I went back a bunch of steps, which is totally irrational. And
Yeah.
it's a tough balance though, because in a way you do have to kind of have that mindset to have the focus and the drive that you need to be successful in the sport. So at this point, I've been doing it pretty seriously. And when I say seriously, like as a center part of my life for over 10 years. And I've never been that person who trains 30 hours a week. I mean, I've rarely ever trained more than 20 to 22. And I've never really handled that well, and I've always felt like, oh, I'm never doing enough, or so I better not skip a workout, or, and one thing that's changed is I just try to listen to my body a little bit more and my mind, because it's not just about mental toughness and hard work. It's also about focus and being able to be calm and focused, and in order to get something from the workout and be in a good place mentally. So I give myself a little more leeway than I used to. And like I said, that's not necessarily always a good thing. Like I said, like after this kind of downtime I just had, I do have to get back on a solid 20 hours a week if I'm going to compete at all at the level of things these days. So I'm not saying, oh, it's good to slack off, but I don't think having a certain attitude of day in, day out, you better do it perfect, is very sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think as you go through the sport as a pro athlete, you have to adjust to how kind of your mind and body changes over time. And I forget how we got on this topic and what point I was making, but just kind of, weaving triathlon into the whole mindset of trying to keep things a little more simple and doing what's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was very articulate. Thanks for sharing. And I want to ask you a question that you may know I'm going to ask you, but I'm trying to think of the best way to weave it in. But I guess you've been redefining what Lesley is and how you interact with triathlon and, what's important. I mean, you're changing where you're living, so that's a huge piece. And, you've taken this break because you realized that there was some kind of a shift that needed to happen. So within triathlon and outside of triathlon, to you, who is Lesley?
Oh man, within and outside, I would say that I am, this is tough because I'll be honest with you, I'm not very comfortable like bragging about myself. And to me, to answer this question, and you kind of have to, and I don't mean bragging, I just mean like, if I were to say, and let's just say I'll say positive things about myself, I look at myself as coming from a place of being pretty insightful, having pretty good intuition, these days really trusting myself and my gut. And, when it comes to who I want to be around, who I want to give my energy to, where I want to put my time and energy. I like I said, I don't necessarily execute perfectly, but it's something that I think about and have the ability to do. I would say me as a person, I am a hard worker. I know that's I have a good work ethic. I know that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but trying to kind of redefine what that means and what's important to me. And I guess, and in a way it's kind of hard to answer right this second, more detailed than that, because it's been a little bit of a rough year for me, just kind of trying to figure that out. And when I say figure that out, just kind of trying to figure out what my priorities are in life moving forward, what I want. Because as much as in no way am I done with triathlon, I am, at 41, it's kind of time to start thinking about that and just mentally where I'm at with the sport and everything and just where the sport is headed. I have been trying to think more about what I want to do after triathlon, just so I'm a little ahead of it. And I think that has made this year pretty tough on me, but also I know in the long term, a necessary phase of things.
Yeah.
Did that
have you found
answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's good. I know I'll ask a couple follow-up questions, but I think it makes sense. And just an observation, and I'm going to ask if it's actually more of an assumption, but it's an experience that I've had. So I'm only 31. I can still do the sport a little bit longer. I would hope. I'm not in any way, shape, or form near to be a professional, but when I first started doing it, I had this dream, this completely naive belief that I could get to that level and get there pretty quick. And with anything that you put a lot of time and effort into, you kind of have this hockey stick approach where, you start to accelerate, and then it kind of plateaus off, and you have the law of diminishing returns. So the more time you put into something, the smaller the returns get. And, I have had that belief for so long, but it's this underlying piece of me has started to believe that maybe triathlon isn't the thing that I want to put all of my eggs in the basket in terms of trying to reach this ultimate goal. And but the other half of me has been combating with that underneath, I think, for several months now, maybe even close to a year. And now I'm just coming to the place where I'm starting to verbalize it. And it's always interesting how deep down for me in my, viewing the other journeys of my life, I have these beliefs that I hold really strong in the beginning. And then there's another belief that I'm uncomfortable with, or a knowledge of it. And it starts to kind of bubble up. And then once I start to verbalize it, it brings a semblance of peace, but it's almost hard to accept some of those things that I'm oh, maybe, do I need to say this right now? I guess this is real. And then once I say, it feels a lot different. Have you had similar experiences? I don't know how articulate that was.
That was actually very well put. And I think applies to a lot of people with a lot of things in life, because it's all about kind of what we're telling ourselves and the choices we're making. And sometimes you just have to face realities. And I think there's a balance of, well, like for example, I think the culture of the sport can be very like, no, you're all, and honestly, for pros and age groupers, and let's say age groupers who have a job, and a family, but still, if they sign up for a full Ironman, I think the culture of the sport is like or 70.3, that it's very like, you got to be all in for this and go big or go home. And there's a part of that that's true, but I also think there's a lot of different combinations of ways to do things. It's like in ways to enjoy it. I don't think it has to, even for pros, or let's say for me at this phase of my life. I mean, the reality is I do have to think about the future. I do have to deal with some things going on. So it's like, I'm trying to frame it as like, how can triathlon be something that is an outlet for me and peaceful for me and connects me to nature and connects me with other people and community. And there's all these other aspects of it that are so positive that I am trying to make myself remember, separate from the be the best you can be, go as hard as you can go, make all the sacrifices. And again, I in no way am saying like, oh, I'm trying to take it less seriously or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's a lot about how you choose to frame it in your mind and how you can make it an enjoyable part of your life. Because for me at this point, if it's not overall enjoyable, then it's really time to move on. And I'm definitely not there. But I do think I'm at a point where I just look at it a little different, like I just said, and I'm trying to just get the positive, really focus on the positives versus that you're all in grind. And I think those two attitudes can exist at one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for some people, maybe they can't. For me, I think they can. And I think that's the best route for me right now.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And I think it becomes harder for me, just in my experience, especially with my wife, actually, believe it or not. So like in the past, I've started a business and I told her up and down, like, this is going to be the newest, greatest, best thing ever. And I poured like 7 years of my life into it. And in the beginning, she was more skeptical. And in the end, she believed in it more than I. In fact, so much so that when COVID happened and I had to kind of shut this business down, like we were in a Walmart parking lot and I told her like, hey, here's what's going to have to happen. And she started crying because she became so attached with this thing that I had created. And again, with triathlon, like I told her up and down, like, I'm going to get my pro card. I'm going to do this, da, 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 da. And, she believes in it more now than I do. So it becomes hard. And especially if you have a coach or, and you're having those conversations and you're trying to figure out, where to go mentally. So I didn't have a real point in sharing that other than, I think it is okay to have that kind of split mindset and figure out where you're going.
Yeah. And what you said of where to go mentally, it kind of, I think we all feel like sometimes we're not in control of our mental state or emotions. And there are times, but there are things where you can choose where to go mentally. Mm-hmm. And you can choose, hey, this is the mindset and this is how I'm going to frame this. And I think that can be a choice, and you can be very intentional with things in that way because, there's not one exact right way to do things. And I think, again, with triathlon, the culture of the sport, which makes it great, is that all-in mindset. And I think you can be all in your own way and frame it in your own way. And I also think that taking breaks from things is good. And honestly, I just start thinking of it again, like I said, just mentally more and more these days. For me, that breaks are needed more than physically. Because you do need to be able to have kind of a clear mind to be able to focus and do what's needed, again, to compete at all. Yeah, things are right now. So however you can do that. And one thing that got me thinking on that is I went to the Magnolia Masters Pro Swim Camp at the beginning of 2023 with Tim Floyd. And I didn't really realize this before the camp, but he ended up talking with us a lot on just generally like doing things like meditation and trying to have a calm, focused mind and clear, and how much that actually affects you physically and your heart rate and just your ability, because during an Ironman, you don't get to have headphones or an audiobook or anything like that. It's just you and yourself out there. And that's a great challenge of it. And so, a really busy mind with a bunch of negative thoughts that affects you physically, even if you're looking at your watch and you're like, I'm going to go this pace no matter what. I think, all of my good races that I've had, if I try to think of my best performances, I honestly don't think I was having positive thoughts during them, or like, a ton of positive self-talk or or, oh man, this is so great. It's really been like kind of, I've had a clear mind. I haven't really been thinking about much. I've just kind of let my body just go. And I haven't thought about it very much. And I think, when you're in a good spot, just physical fitness wise, that helps, right? Like chicken or the
Sure.
egg. Like it's also easier to feel good mentally when you are in really good shape and you're feeling good. But it's just something really that triathlon has taught me. And then going to that camp really reiterated it, is that it's not about being super positive. It's just more about just kind of having a peaceful mind.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it makes sense totally to me, because I've raced now, I'm not sure, maybe 10, 11, 70.3s, and the past 3 of them have been the best ones, not even necessarily because they've been faster, and this one I did recently was the fastest, but going out there, like, the mind was a lot different in the way that I've just approached it. Like, because I used to get really bent out of shape for, watching my power numbers average drop on the bike or something and whatever.
Yeah.
But now it's just like, well, I'm going to give my body every chance and opportunity to do what it can do on race day. And then once I get out there and I start doing it, then really enjoy it. And sometimes it really is taking in, like the other morning in Ohio 70.3, it was a gorgeous morning. The birds were singing out in the cornfields, and, here I am riding my bike, and, it's painful to a degree, but it was a really beautiful moment. And then getting out on the run and being able to be consistent mentally these past few races more than I ever have before. Like it was a nice feeling. Like you said, kind of clear, just executing and remembering the small things, but taking it all in, and not pinning myself to any one feeling or expectation or pace or whatever like that. It's a better place to be.
Totally. And I think what you said is, you probably felt very like present in the moment when you're noticing things like the birds and the sunrise and all that. And I think, and again, another cliche thing people say all the time, but it just is so true. Like if you can, during racing, the more present you can be and be like, okay, what's the next little thing I need to do? When do I need to drink again? When do I need to take a gel or take something in? Where's the next aid station? Versus being like, oh man, my power's dropping on the bike. Okay, I guess that's normal. But, oh God, what's the run going to be like? Oh gosh, I have 13.1 miles to run. Does this mean it's going to affect my run? Like, I think that you don't want to think too far ahead.
Yeah.
Like, you have to think, obviously, a little bit far ahead, but not think, just be like, let's just get this done. And for me, like the part, and I'm not alone, but I try to, like, before the swim start, or like let's say the 10 to 20 minutes leading up to the swim start, I really try hard to not think about much, because that is like my least favorite part of the race. And when the gun goes off and like a bunch of people swim over me and hit me, and somehow that's like my least favorite. But once I'm through that, I do usually kind of be like, okay, now we're just out here, like, I'm just going to do what I can do. And, try to make the best out of it and stay present. And that's the goal, at least. Yeah. I will say, it's funny I'm saying all this, because I pretty much was the opposite at my last race. But it was I'm looking at it as that was a good reminder of how important the mental state is. And to not, again, I don't know how much control I have over it, but just mentally and physically for the race. What'd you say?
You don't know how much control you have over the mental state, you're saying?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, like, for example, at my last race in Mont Tremblant, I just was like, it was raining before the race. I'm not a big gutsy person on the bike. I'm just not, no excuses. I just, and was feeling kind of flat physically. And I just was, I kind of wasn't very disciplined with my thoughts. And, I mean, and it really showed. So,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah. And when I say being disciplined with my thoughts, just really that goal of being present and trying to just not think about much.
Yeah.
I kind of slacked off on that and was not a pleasant experience. So, it was nice to have, again, trying to spin a positive as always. It was nice to have a reminder that, to not, you know, to do better next time.
Yeah, for sure. So going forward now, because you sound like you have quite a few races that you would potentially like to get to a place where you feel mentally prepared or calm. What are you doing, I guess, to get to that place? Because I know some of the stuff is, I'm asking a little tongue in cheek. It seems kind of circumstantial. Because for me, in the beginning of the year, in February, I went to like this 3-day retreat, and it radically changed my life because it just really opened up some deep pressure cooked areas of my life that I hadn't paid any attention to. And, now we're in July, it's several months, 5 months later or whatever. And some of those old habits try to creep back in, and life gets busy. And, it's just like, had I not gone to that event, I don't know if I would have found like that new level of peace. So like for you,
Right.
what can you do to like get to that place where like, okay, I'm going to go into this with calm?
I know one thing I can do that I need to do, and Tim, who I mentioned, would be happy to hear me say this, but taking a little time out of the day most days to, you can call it meditation or just putting on some sleep music on the phone or some chanting or just something like I've noticed that helps me clear my brain. Like when I say chanting, like the ads I get targeted for them on Instagram.
Okay.
But I just some type of music that, well, and eventually you shouldn't need music to meditate, but I'm just saying for me, it kind of gets me in that mode. And just taking some time out to just clear my brain. And when I see, and a lot with meditation, as I've read and understood and experienced, is it's not about saying, oh, I can't think about anything. It's about just trying to relax and be present. And if a thought comes in, you just try to separate from it and not have judgment on it. And I think that even you take 10 minutes a day to do something like that, I think over time you get into a better mental state. I think that also for me, so there's that as far as an actual thing I think I can do. That would be a big thing for me. And I think also I'm realizing that I think again, this is normal, that when I was first getting into triathlon, I brought a lot of baggage with me from my past, even though I started, late 20s, really not until I moved to Boulder when I was 30, about to turn 31. I kind of brought a lot into it from my past growing up because, even though as an adult, far into being an adult, I think you still get kind of programmed when you're young. And like, I grew up in a household where, had very supportive parents and, they wanted my sister and I to succeed at things. And there was kind of this expectation that you better do a bunch of different types of things, including, doing well in school. And I don't mean, it's not like they were threatening like that, but it was just that somehow became the expectation. I also think that was the parents and kids that I was also around in the community. It was kind of this expectation of always being busy, always trying to get better at everything, always trying to succeed. And as much as I know that attitude comes from a very good place and has and will always help me in life, I think that one thing I'm realizing that it's taken me a while to realize is I have to break off from that attitude a little bit. Like I said, and this goes back to what I was saying, I have to break off from that a little bit and say, how can I enjoy this? Because there's so many times where I'm out riding with a friend at 10 a.m. and I'm like, oh man, I'm so lucky to do this. And I feel so good. And this is so great. It's like, how can I have more of those moments? Because when I have those moments, that's when I actually get in shape. And that's when I'm in a good mental spot for the race. And that's when I do better. And I think it is kind of individual. I think some people having that mindset of like, how do I explain it? Like the grind all the time, on the mind all the time, like, I think for some people that actually helps them succeed. But when I'm really honest with myself, for me, it's like, all right, what's my training? I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to try to enjoy this best that I can. I need to still foster social relationships and sometimes have activities outside of triathlon, which can get very hard when you're trying to train at pro level and when it's a big part of the hours of your day. But I just know when I can separate from that old attitude of my upbringing, I actually think, like I said, even though it does benefit me, I think right now that's how I can be more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think of a lot of things, actually. I'm trying to like put together a lot of these thoughts, so hopefully that makes sense. But when I go to brush my teeth, when I first was learning how to brush my teeth, your mom or your dad or whoever is in there is teaching you, like, you put the toothpaste, here's how much. Here, you put it on this. Okay, you make this motion, and you make sure you get all four corners of your mouth, and and then now, I'm 31 years old. I don't even think about it. You just kind of go do it, and you're done. And I think that mentally, in the way that we think about things, even in training, like we do the same things physically. We look at our training peaks, we fill up our bottles, we get on the bike, and we're kind of thinking,
Right.
okay, I have this many seconds between. Okay, hit the lap button. Okay, now I'm going to go hard. But like you're saying, to have those really good moments when you are kind of taking the deep breath and your eyes are allowed to look on beyond the horizon further than just, your aero bars, and you can take that stuff in. The more that we practice those moments, I think the easier they'll become, because the way
Yes.
that our neural pathways work, they have to be fired multiple times. And it's actually crazy. I saw this video a while back, but these guys, somehow they had a visual representation, like an actual recording of a new neural pathway being fired. And the best way I know how to describe it is like it's almost in like a cloud, which is in your brain, but you can see the electrical signals trying to like penetrate and like connect, and it almost look like lightning. And then once they
Right.
connect, like it's made, and then that connection can become stronger and stronger and stronger, which is a really good thing for the good
Yes.
thoughts and a really bad thing for the bad thoughts. So being able to like compound those over time, like I think it is possible to get to a point where you have so much gratitude, and just you've fired that pathway so many times that you can shut the mind off to a degree and just brush your teeth, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Wow. I'm going to think about that. The lightning reference you made, like that. That was really well put. And kind of what I'm trying to say. And I think maybe those connections you want to make, again, it's an individual thing, and there are different paths to success. It's like everyone has their own, when I say success, and what your definition of that is. And I think even within individuals, like I said, that changes over time. I think the attitudes I had at the beginning of the triathlon were needed. And now I'm just realizing that it has changed for me. And I think, looking at it more from a perspective of being present and finding gratitude, or, in these moments, I think that's the key for me, being my version of success the rest of the time in triathlon at this point.
Yeah.
And my terrible execution of that in Mont Tremblant was a good reminder, like I said. Times.
Yeah, way to be positive. And yeah, it's okay. I think we're allotted. Like none of us are perfect, and it's hard to subscribe to a perfect action or set of actions. But I think it's okay to subscribe to the idea of perfection in an imperfect world, because it leaves us something to shoot for. Like a goal is good, and then and we can enjoy the journey and the process of getting there.
Yeah,
whatever that looks like. But yeah, I think for me, contentment is being content where I am is success. Because a lot of my friends, I live a very interesting life in terms of like work-life balance. I train a bit. I do this podcast thing.
Right.
I don't have to work a ton to like make a living. And then some of my friends, like they hit their lives and it's 9 to 5 or longer. Or some people, they're making tons of money and they're just owned by the business that they run or that they are running, or like as an employee. So it's so interesting how all of that can change. Like, honestly, if you can just have enough money to survive, buy some of the few things that, bring you, real joy, like a bicycle, being able to have that opportunity to get out there. That's what it's really all about. Because some of the wealthiest people who I've met in this world, people who've started massive companies, at the end of the day, all they end up caring about is like their time with their family and being able to have,
Yeah.
this time to kind of disconnect from the other areas of life that stress them out. So yeah, that's what
No,
success I think should be.
totally. I completely agree. And I think that that's something that people come to, like you said, through experience. You just kind of have to figure that out eventually. And I think that, yeah, I mean, it kind of goes to a lot of things. There's just also kind of accepting that everything in life has trade-offs. I mean, again, maybe a cliche thing, but it's true. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's just something, humans have to accept that most things in life, there's a trade-off, one way or the other. There's trade-offs to being, I mean, a real big one, I think, is there's trade-offs to being single versus in a long-term relationship. I mean, it's almost, yeah, there's pros and cons to both. They're just different pros and cons. I think, that applies to career and everything like that too. And I also think kind of along these lines, I think that, like we're talking about, like kind of coming to these realizations. I think sometimes I know I have gotten stuck in thinking and over identifying with things or being like, oh, this is my identity as a person, or this is, and you say, how do I describe myself as a person? Well, I think that kind of like that can change over time. And I think that's okay. And I think it's important to have an identity and things you identify with and that define you as a person. But I also think those can and will change over time. And that's totally fine. And can make things more fun and enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you said that because that really, I think brings around the reason why I have, especially more now that I've done 70 episodes, of this podcast. For me, it's been, I'll have historically quite a lot of professional triathletes or people who started businesses. And like, as people know them on social media, that's who they identify with, or that's who they are. Like Lesley Smith, the professional triathlete, but that's so two-dimensional in terms of, the personality and the person behind that, because, we can talk about you playing violin. We can talk about your high school experience, or you used to manage events in the past, which I'd love to hear about some of those things. And there's so much more to a person than what they're known for. Like if we're all into this self-branding thing.
Yes.
The whole,
yes.
Jack of all trades, master of none, I think is a more attractive thing than the master of one. Although there's, Yo-Yo Ma, he's played cello forever and he's the best cellist that's out there. And there's beauty to that. But even for that, like he is a three-dimensional character who I'm sure has many more interests, loves, and, positives and negatives about himself. So it's really cool to hear all of these different ways to think.
Yeah. For sure. And oh my gosh, that's such a good point. I think what social media does, and by the way, there's a lot I love about social media. I think that just to connect with things you're interested in, like the obvious thing, triathlon. Like I even put on my Instagram, I'm like, this is a triathlon oriented account, because that's mostly, I'll do things for my personal life, but that's a lot what it's centered around. And I think that's great because that's kind of the area of interest I'm in when it comes to social media. But I think in general, whether no matter who you are, if you are on Instagram, and let's say social media in general, but I think especially Instagram, you are kind of branding yourself. And I think that it started for me being on Instagram, and maybe at that time it started as, oh, it's a simple way to share pictures and what's going on in my life with other people. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just kind of, I think we've all watched it blow up into a lot more than that in selling. And I have thoughts on the selling part too. And I think that everyone, I mean, even people who are just posting pictures of their family and they're not selling anything, you're still kind of deep down saying, ooh, how do I want to portray myself to the world? And I think it can just become too limited. Like, and we all know it's everyone's highlight reel too. So it's just kind of hard to remember that sometimes.
Yeah.
And what you said about the selling thing, I was just talking with someone about this the other day, is I think that in a way, the era of influencers and that form of advertising for brands and companies, in a way, I see it as very positive, because I like to think that most people are being at least somewhat genuine. Like I know for me, like I'm not going to promote something that I know to be a bad product or a company that's not ethical. And by the way, I shouldn't have even said that, because that's a really nuanced nuanced thing. But do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so I just hope that if I see an influencer, let's say in another realm, promoting something, I like to think that if anything, selfishly for their reputation, these people are not going to promote something that's a bad product. So maybe if it's being targeted towards me, maybe it actually is something that I'm interested in. And whereas I think as opposed to the traditional model of advertising of, oh, you just know most likely a big corporation or a big company is paying for a media slot on the TV, that's like very transparent that that's just being paid for by a company, but it's almost, less trustworthy. So in that sense, I see that as a positive thing if we're going to keep having advertising in this world. But I think, the downfall to it is like we just kind of talked about, is it can, as an individual, it can make you, you're always thinking about, you could think more about branding and promoting versus being authentic.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's the downside to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it can be the good, but also the bad part of anything that we do in this world, because money has to be made in order for these things to exist. And I mean, advertising is the reason that things like the Tour de France or whatever is allowed to endure, where people are able to be paid to ride their bicycles or whatever it is. That's just, unless there's another model out there, which I don't know what it is in a capitalist, society, it's very hard to do it otherwise.
Exactly.
I'm not sure how in the world you would do it. Yeah.
No, totally. And that's kind of what I'm trying to say. I'm like, if that's gonna be the model and the way society is right now, I don't know, maybe it's better to come from an individual who's saying, hey, I actually tried this product. And that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. It'll be fascinating to see where things shift, because the influencer marketing, especially the micro influencer marketing, has definitely taken off in the past 7 years or so to just like a scale that I would have never even thought of. Because before that, it was like everyone was into the Facebook ads and Google ads, which are still big, but there's more opportunities out there to do it through that mode with the influencers. So we'll see what happens, but definitely interesting time. So shifting gears a little bit, kind of for the latter part of the podcast, I would love to hear from you. What would you want your life, and you can be as specific as you want, to look like 5 years from now in terms of what you're doing, what you're not doing, how you're living, where you're living? Are you going to stay in the Boulder bubble?
Yeah. Good point. Okay. So as far as just like where I'm living, I'll start with that since you mentioned it. I really do. I do love Boulder, and I specifically really like Colorado. It's like pretty good full package wise. Like there's better things other places, but as far as just like full package place to live, it's pretty great. All around, like weather and just kind of
it's
a very
gorgeous.
outdoorsy, active vibe is something I always want to keep as a priority, because like I know in me I can be kind of like a sloth and lazy, and I'm kind of nervous sometimes. I'm like, oh gosh, when I don't have triathlon, I hope I think I will, but I hope I still value being active as much, and maybe in different ways, doing different things, training for a running race, training for or something like that. Kind of going off on a tangent, but so I do want to stay in Colorado. My sister and her family live in Minneapolis, which I really like Minneapolis. I've debated that could be somewhere I would move in my life. Other than that, I haven't really, I haven't really considered leaving Colorado or the Boulder area. So I see myself here, if I had to say. As far as just my life in general, I would say, and again, this past year-ish has really made me think about this more. I would say I just want to be, I foresee in 5 years not being in triathlon at the level that I am. And I still want to have some sort of physically active goal, even if it's like train for a half marathon where you try to do good in your age group, but it's not the center of your life sort of thing. That's how I see myself being in that realm. And then as far as other things like what I'm doing for a living, I would like to, how do I say this? I just want to do something like you said that I feel good enough about, that pays the bills, that gives me some sort of, I think I'll always want some challenge or incentive. I think that's kind of that drives me a lot. So, and I'm not saying, oh, that just means I should work in sales, but something where I have some sort of incentive to succeed and to basically, to make something successful where I have some autonomy and control over it, if that makes sense. And then ideally something that's like not all consuming. It's not all I think about all the time. It's not, I'm able to step away from it. So I'm being very vague because I am very vague in my head right now with everything.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you have quite the network, so I'm sure there's opportunities within and without triathlon in terms of the industry and community. But it is growing. Although I suspect, this is kind of a tangent, but I suspect that the industry of triathlon will contract in the next 5 to 10 years before it kind of really reaches this potential, just because of how much money has been artificially injected into it. There's just a lot of money around the PTO and even Ironman and some of these other things where, for as much money is being invested into it, I don't see the return coming out quite yet. And so some of these VC firms, like, they have pretty deep pockets, and they will probably for the next 5 to 6 years. But if that doesn't catch up and there's a product that isn't created to where it can like really be, like we were saying, for the Tour de France or whatever, to have those viewership and to get those advertising dollars, it'd probably contract. So we'll see. But I don't know. That's just my thoughts on that.
I would say generally I think the same, and I won't claim to know, but I think that, one thing that I look at is I look in the past, like when I was very, very first getting into triathlon, and there was the high V, there was all those non-draft Olympic races where pros could race so much more frequently, and there were so many more races. Like, in a way, there's more money in the sport now, but then in a way there was more money in the sport then, in the sense of, again, when I was first getting into it, I'm like, oh gosh, could I go back in time with my abilities now, please? Because like it just, there was like the High V series, there was the Lifetime series, and then you had Ironman they didn't have the Pro series, and honestly, the prize purses were maybe smaller overall. But you would have 3 70.3s in one weekend that had a pro field.
Yeah.
Because every race had a pro field. And so I think that when you look at that obviously changed, right? And it's different now. So you can kind of deduct it's going to change again in some way, just like everything does. And it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think you would ever get back into event management? Because I know you had some partaking in that.
Yes, I would, because I still think I would have some networking and connections through that. And I did like a lot of aspects of that. I did kind of like, just a lot of, it just uses organizational skills and, being super detail oriented and kind of, in a way similar to racing. It's like you kind of have all this thing culminates to this like big event, this big 3 days that are really important, let's say. And I think I kind of like that cyclical nature of things. Does that make sense? For you're kind of like, okay, you're building for this event and then it happens and then kind of come down. And then, I guess there's plenty of industries that's similar, but I kind of like that aspect of it. It's very kind of similar to racing in a lot of ways. And I even think about that when I'm at races, like whoever's coordinating all the volunteers, whoever did all the permitting, like the event organizers have their whole world going on while we are there focusing on our race. And that aspect of it is kind of cool. So so that's a maybe. As much as I've been on here saying, oh yeah, I'm thinking about the future, I haven't thought about it super, super specifically. And just kind of thought of a lot of different things to do. And also, like you said, I think it would be very fitting and cool to still work somehow in the endurance industry. And there are a lot of ways to do that. So
there are lots of ways. Yeah. The Lesley Smith Racing Series sounds like something that it could be signed up for with ease. So whenever you launch that series, just let us know.
I will. Help me promote it.
Yeah, exactly. So one final question for you, and it's an advice question. So I want you to imagine you just finished a swim, and a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 19-year-old who has found that they are really good at swim, biking, and running. They want to make this a professional career. what advice would you give to them practically for like making sure that they build the foundation to make sure that they can do that successfully?
That's a good point. If I was being very honest with them, I would say you're going to need to make a lot of sacrifices. And and by the way, this sounds like I'm telling them back. You're going to need to make a lot of sacrifices, and the feelings of commitment and enthusiasm and motivation that you have right now might change over time. So the commitment has to go beyond these feelings you have right now. And maybe some people keep that maybe some people keep that motivation and those feelings of, oh, this is such a challenge. Here's this challenge I'm working for, and I want to get better, and I want to get better, and I want to get better. And I think that I would tell them to try to put triathlon in your life, look at it in a way that is sustainable, and that if you're really going to commit to it, there's going to be hard times, there's going to be boring times, there's going to be stressful times, like anything. So once these feelings of newness go away, I mean, kind of like a long-term relationship, like deciding you're just going to commit to it no matter what, no matter, when those feelings change.
Yeah. So you've mentioned the long-term relationship thing a couple of times, so it's begged me to want to ask a question. For Lesley that may be in a long-term relationship in the future, are you more in the place of now where you meet this person, they're all around pretty decent person, but when those feelings come and wane, are you more willing now to stick through the boring and difficult times than you used to?
I would say yes, because I think that comes just with experience and getting older and kind of like realizing that.
Sure.
So
Wisdom.
I would say yes. I also think that this is a tough one. I would need to like prepare on paper for answering.
Yeah.
So I would say generally the answer is yes. And I think that really having a good foundation, or really knowing yourself and what your important values are before getting into a long-term relationship, I think that's more important for me than ever. And making sure that aligns from the beginning is the most important thing. And that might kind of sound like common sense, but I think, when
It's
you're
not
younger,
commonly
like your
practiced.
20s, you just kind of get carried away more easily with relationships. And I think, with maturity comes kind of the realization of, you don't have to get carried away. You can really focus on what your values are. You can really know what's important to you and make that choice. So
Yeah.
I kind of, again, vaguely answered a question, but
Yeah. No, I think it's good. If I was to rephrase that, I'd say that you were saying something along the lines of, as we get older, infatuation becomes less of a factor, and we realize the person that we may end up spending the rest of our life with is someone that needs to see eye to eye on our everyday values. And yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to say it. Because if not, then there's this old biblical concept of being unequally yoked, which basically just means like that the burdens you carry and the values you have set, if they are not somewhat equal, then all you're going to do is butt heads all day long. And that's a really hard
yoked.
thing.
I like that unequal yoked. That's good. I've never heard that before, but you basically articulated what I was trying to say. So
you said it. It made sense. It made sense. Yeah. But Lesley, thank you so much for coming on and allowing me to take another hour of your life. I know you got a lot that you got going on, but super excited to see what happens for the rest of the season and after triathlon for the Lesley Racing Series, the Smith Racing Series. But thank you so much for taking the time and sharing a bit of your life with us.
Well, thanks for having me, and just really enjoyed the conversation in general. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much to Lesley for coming on the podcast and sharing a bit about her life and all of the thoughts that she's had going on and swirling around her mind over this past few years. It sounds like she is in a bit of a transitory phase and figuring out what the future is, but still has quite the engine for triathlon, obviously, and so excited to see how she continues to progress throughout this year. If you made it to this point in the podcast, just want to say thank you so much for being here. If you are watching or listening on any of the platforms such as Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, or any of those, it would be really awesome if you could like, comment, subscribe, follow, drop a comment. Anything and everything helps us to continue to go. So really do appreciate that from you guys. Also, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, you can do so at the stupidquestions.show website. Again, thank you so much for being here, and I will catch you guys in the next one.